If Justin Trudeau is the president of the Kingdom of Cain, then Chrystia Freeland is its economic false prophet, and she's back answering questions. But before we begin to listen, we should talk about the fact how brutal it is that she talks to us like we're toddlers. We're not. Her kindness stings with intolerable insult. We can handle being talked to like adults precisely because we are adults. We're not children. Freeland is the most childish person in the room, and yet she speaks to us like we have the intellectual capacity of snails. Let's hear what she had to say.
I'll say a couple things, and then I think maybe Sean wants to say a couple things too. So let me start by saying there is no federal government in Canadian history that has invested as ambitiously and as aggressively in infrastructure as our government.
She acts like that's something to be proud of. It's not. It's not, because it means the private market isn't investing. Government isn't investing. You are investing, and government is doing it on your behalf, even though no one wants to make the investments. The private market doesn't want to make the investments. That's why we have to do so through government. We don't want to make the investments, but this government is doing it for us. We consistently hammer the rhetoric of government is investing, government doesn't invest. It's not government's capital. They didn't earn this money. It's your money. You're investing, and government is doing it for you. But unlike, for example, an investment fund, you don't have the option to put money into this pool. Government forces you to do so. And if you don't like what they're investing in, too bad.
It was actually the centerpiece of our 2015 campaign commitment, and we have delivered on that. And I think it's really important for people to understand that that money is actually ramping up in the years ahead. Infrastructure takes a long time to build, and the money is on the books, and there's going to be more and more going forward.
Okay, so Freeland said that infrastructure takes a long time to build. She's right. And yet we're in a housing crisis right now. And her government is telling us that their infrastructure investment is going to solve the housing crisis right now. So which is it? Either investment or infrastructure takes a long time to build, which means no immediate relief for the housing crisis, or it doesn't take a long time to build, therefore almost immediately increasing supply and decreasing the price of homes. So, which is it? Which is it? Of course, it's true that infrastructure takes a long time to build, and therefore it will not solve the housing crisis, all else equal.
So in 23-24, there is $4.3 billion of federal money going into infrastructure across the country. In 24-25, it is nearly $5 billion. That is money already committed. In 25-26, it is more than $7 billion. And so, people just need to understand the money is there. It is out there building things across Canada. And I think we all recognize that when we travel around Canadian cities. Last week I was in Winnipeg, Quebec City, and Toronto, and you just look around and you see infrastructure being built. That is a really good thing.
Unbelievable. You go to Calgary, the downtown lights are dim. She sees infrastructure being built. I see decrepit hives of socialism. I'm not saying that people want that. I'm saying that's what the policies of this government generate. Look at the state of the downtowns in this country today compared to even 5 years ago. It's haunting.
Second, as Sean said, we recognize that housing is the central challenge for Canadians right now. When people talk about affordability, yes, they're talking about prices at the grocery store, and Francois Philippe is doing terrific work there. The single biggest thing in families' budgets is paying your mortgage or paying the rent. And we know that the solution there is we just have to build more faster. We are absolutely committed to that, and we are doing it. You have seen a tremendous rollout of housing, not just projects, but housing measures over the past few months, whether it is lifting the GST on purpose-built rental, that's 200 to 300,000 new homes. Sean has been zooming around the country doing housing accelerator fund deals. I think we're at 550,000 new homes built that way.
Oh, they've been built? They've been built? Show us the data. Like, show us the new homes that have been constructed. Because she's talking about all of these new houses. New housing announcements is more accurate. It's very easy to make an announcement. Where are the returns? Where are the real homes being built? She just told us a minute ago that infrastructure takes a long time to build. That's correct. And yet now she's talking about these hundreds of thousands of homes that have been built. Weird. There's a disconnect there, which is so typical of the Liberal government to utter things which are in direct contradiction to each other and then act like it's a rational statement to make.
Our former rental construction financing initiative, now it's the apartment construction loan fund. That has been topped up, and that is responsible for hundreds of thousands of homes being built. So we get that. We are working hard to do more and more on housing. And we do recognize that we have to have conversations around being sure that there is infrastructure to support that housing. But I just want to conclude by going back to where I started, which is there is a lot of money in the pipeline right now building the infrastructure that Canada needs. And we are glad that we have put that money out there. Sean?
I have never listened to a woman who is more facetious, or a man who is more facetious about the problems facing Canadians than this woman right here. Trudeau, maybe. It is disgraceful how she treats the problems of this country. You can tell she doesn't care. She's almost giddy with pleasure. It's absolutely intolerable. Canadians are suffering because of the policies that she and her government adopt. And then she talks to us like we can hardly understand the problems. Absolutely brutal.
Years that you weigh such things. Last week, the head of NATO asked Canada for a firm deadline for when it's going to meet the 2% defense spending target. That is an estimated cost about 20 billion more per year than Ottawa currently spends. What is your response to such a timeline coming?
Okay, well, thank you for the question. And the Prime Minister spoke at some length about that in Warsaw yesterday. So let me just highlight some of the key things he pointed out. First, Canada today is one of the big spenders in NATO. We are the 7th biggest spending NATO country out of 31. Second, I think it's really worth pointing out that it was under the previous Conservative government that Canada's defense spending fell to below 1%. And our government has significantly ramped up defense spending. In 2016-17, we were spending just over 18 billion a year on defense. In 26-27, we're going to be spending $40 billion a year on defense. That is without any new commitments. That is a lot of money. And then the final thing that I'll say is, of course, financing matters. What also matters is being effective and being there when it matters. And certainly from my perspective, the most acute security challenge in the world today, at this moment, to the rules-based international order, the front lines of the fight between democracy and dictatorship runs through Ukraine. That's where the battle is not theoretical. That's where the battle is joined. And I think as Canadians, we, we should be really grateful to the brave people of Ukraine. They are the ones who are fighting and dying. But I think we can take some comfort from the fact that we are really there with them.
What is she talking about? This is such a nonsense answer. We don't even need to listen to any more of it. Taking a lecture from the Liberals on defense spending is laughable when we need to be defended from them. They're the ones who oppress Canadians. Our enemy is not overseas. Our enemy is here at home. First of all, our first and foremost enemy is sin. That much is clear and present. But as far as governments go, our enemy is here in Ottawa. That's not a radical thing to say. All we have to do is look at their actions. They're the ones that Canadians should be concerned about. It's disgraceful what they're doing. They will not meet the NATO targets. That much is certain and clear based on their answers. They refuse to give any hard numbers. We are the laughingstock of the world internationally when it comes to defense spending and Canada's commitment to defense. And just who is the Liberals, or who are the Liberals defending us from? That is, how can they claim to defend Canada when they themselves are crushing this nation, flooding this nation with hundreds of thousands of new individuals every year? They don't believe in borders. So what are they defending? The Liberals don't believe in borders. So what is there to defend? How can we defend our borders if there are no borders? How can we defend our home from invasion when Trudeau wants to make our home everyone's home? Doesn't make any sense at all.
Prime Minister's choice to be in Ukraine on the second anniversary of the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, that was a big deal. It meant a lot to the people of Ukraine to see him there. What meant even more is we committed $3 billion this year to support Ukraine in its fight.
Canadians are suffering. Canadians are suffering, can't pay their groceries, can't pay for fuel, can't pay for their homes, all of these things, but we have billions and billions more for other countries. It's despicable. It's
Maybe. We'll go next to Promit from Reuters.
Good morning, Minister. My name is Promit Mukherjee from Reuters. So you are heading off to the G20 summit in Brazil. And the US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen just said that it's absolutely necessary and urgent to actually support and unlock the frozen assets of Russia. Do you agree with this, or do you have concerns on repurposing these assets?
Thank you for the question. I am actually getting on a plane, in fact, 3 different planes, to get to that G7 and G20 meeting.
Are those planes carbon neutral? They use windmills to fly?
And I had a long conversation with Secretary Yellen over the weekend. This is an issue that I have been discussing with her for not just months, but really since the war began. The issue of the assets of the Russian central bank has been a central Canadian preoccupation. We have thought from the outset that that was a very, very important point of leverage. And Canada was very strongly involved in the initial decision to freeze the assets of the Russian central bank. And we have been centrally involved in the work being done to take the next step and confiscate those assets.
This speaks to a larger problem of central banks insofar as they exercise a demonstrable amount of control, or perhaps more accurately, they and the government combined exercise a ridiculous amount of control over a population. Central banks are brutal. Central banks are horrible. The government loves them. Governments love central banks. Big bankers love central banks. But as free individuals, we should have nothing good to say about central banks.
I have been working closely with Secretary Yellen she and I agree 100%. The Prime Minister is very engaged in this work, and at the G7 leaders meeting that happened on Saturday while the Prime Minister was in Kyiv, he advanced the issue very strongly. When we were in Warsaw yesterday, the Prime Minister and I was part of the conversation too, discussed the issue with Prime Minister Donald Tusk. And if you look back to our press conference yesterday, Prime Minister Tusk sort of strongly supported the idea. We recognize that we have partners who have some questions that they're asking about this initiative. But the Canadian perspective is we have to work hard, find answers to those questions, and move forward. And there are really two principal reasons for that. First of all, aggressor pays. Russia every single day is wrecking Ukraine.
I'm not listening to this. Do you notice how Freeland says so much without saying absolutely anything at all? She says she'll speak for 10 minutes to say something which could have been said in 5 seconds. That is the worst. It's a perfect picture of a politician wasting time, pretending to work, but it's intolerable.
Last week, your government closed most of CDAP to new applications after allocating just $574 million of the $4 billion you budgeted. So that's about an eighth. What gives?
You go,
Well,
I
listen,
can say
Murad, first of all, I just want to say thank you for being one of the first here this morning. I saw you first, so it's great that
the provinces would provide drugs for diabetics and birth control. Could you respond to that?
Yeah, thank you for the question, David. And look, I absolutely understand and am sympathetic to the focus on Pharmacare. Today is not a day for a Pharmacare announcement. And in view of the limited time, I'm just going to point you all to what I've said already at some length about Pharmacare. That's all we have to say about it for today.
Pharmacare is brutal. It's socialist. It will harm the nation severely. It will cause individuals to suffer desperately. Pharmacare is awful. Awful, awful, awful. I've heard an announcement that Alberta is considering or is going to opt out of the deal, and so they should. So all provinces should. Do we trust a single member of parliament with our healthcare? Do we think that they really want what's best for us? Do we think Trudeau wants what's best for us? Do we think Jagmeet Singh, that radical, wants what's best for us? They don't. They don't. They act like profit is evil. It's not. It tells the market and individuals how to allocate goods in the market so there aren't shortages. Look at the healthcare system right now. It's broken and it's terrible. Waiting hours upon hours upon hours to go to the emergency room and then be told by a doctor, take an Advil for this particular ailment because we don't have time to treat you properly. Government is centralizing. Government is, if possible, becoming even more radical, and they're trying to exercise more control. This woman in particular. I talk about her in my book, Kingdom of Cain. Again, she is Canada's economic false prophet. Her intentions are malevolent, and she's malicious.